John Holman reporting there. Now, the US Secretary of State John Kerry says Jordan and Israel have agreed new steps to calm tensions over access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem. Access to the site, which is known to Jews as Temple Mount and to Muslims as the Haram al-Sharif, has fueled weeks of violence in Israel and the occupied territories. On Saturday, after a meeting with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Jordan, John Kerry said Israel has agreed to uphold the tradition of Muslim-only prayer at the site. Well, Jordan is custodian of the compound and proposed round-the-clock surveillance of all sites within it, a proposal that Israel has accepted. Kerry said that was a game changer that would discourage anybody from disturbing the sanctity of the holy site.
Today, I hope we can begin to turn the page on this very difficult period. We have to join together in calling for an immediate end to violence. We must stress the importance of avoiding provocative actions and rhetoric, and we must work cooperatively. It's the only way to go forward.
Well, a peace was also held earlier in Tel Aviv. Our reporter Andrew Simmons joined the crowd to find out more.
These people are from the Peace Now movement. This is a large rally, much larger than anyone expected. Several thousand, I would say, filling the square and also all the way along the highway, the main highway, which is closed off in downtown Tel Aviv. Now, Peace Now goes back to 1978, and what they're calling for is the downfall of the present Israeli government. They're attacking Benjamin Netanyahu for his policies. They want a two-state solution. They want peace talks straight away, and they say there's no way that there can be security without a political solution. Now, with me now is Mossi Raz, who's a member of Peace Now, and of course you are a member of one of the opposition parties in Israel. Tell me this, what is the main objective of this demonstration?
Main objective is to call the government to go back home and to tell them that the only way to secure the citizens of Israel and Palestine is by agreement between both sides, peace agreement between two independent states.
But it would appear that the two sides couldn't be further apart right now. The central issue seems to be settlements, and not obviously the central issue is occupation, but second to that, settlements which are illegal in international law. What is your stand on that?
We say all the years since 1978 the settlements should be evacuated, or if the Palestinians agree to have any other agreements. But the settlements are illegal and they have to be evacuated unless there is another agreement between both sides. This is a problem to Israel, this is a problem to Palestine, and we must bring an end to this problem.
Well, despite both words and actions aimed at ending the unrest, violence continues. On Saturday, Israeli forces shot dead a Palestinian teenager who they say tried to stab a soldier. The shooting happened at a checkpoint in northern Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The 16-year-old can be seen running through traffic towards the crossing. Israeli forces say he was carrying a knife. 56 Palestinians and 8 Israelis have been killed this month in a series of attacks in Israel and the occupied territories. Well, the Israeli government has responded to attacks on its citizens over the last month by deploying extra security forces to the streets. Human rights activists are condemning the beating and wrongful arrest and detention of a Palestinian man. That's an incident which was caught on security cameras. Stephanie Decker went to meet him in the occupied West Bank.
Ansar Asi is at work. Outside in the street, there's a standoff between young Palestinians and the Israeli army, so he stops in the doorway. What follows is not often caught on camera.
He
came to me without any questions. He hit me and I fell. Then around 5 soldiers came and they beat me without any questions. I was telling them I didn't throw rocks, I was at work. It's as if I wasn't even speaking at this point. They were hitting me and trying to drag me outside.
There's an illegal Israeli settlement just a few hundred meters up that road, and the confrontations were taking place around this area. Now, Ansar was working in this storeroom, as the CCTV shows, when the Israeli soldiers stormed in and started beating him. He was then handcuffed, blindfolded and arrested. The next day he was taken to hospital to treat his wounds. Ansar says it took 3 days until he was questioned. He still has bruising now, more than 2 weeks later. Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, who released the video of the attack, alleged the police initially refused to check his alibi, and it took 6 days for him to be released without charge.
It's the culture of impunity that we're seeing here. The soldiers probably expect that consequences for violence, such violence against Palestinians, will be remote, if even that. And indeed, one can imagine all of the other instances that certainly take place all the time against Palestinians, but are not caught on video.
The Israeli army says it is investigating the incident, and its initial findings are that the soldiers' actions are unacceptable.
It's planting hatred and tensions between us and the Jews, and a person feels that he is not a human being. This is not humane treatment. If it was humane, then they wouldn't do that to a person.
Palestinians say these kinds of incidents, and worse, happen all the time, and that it's only rarely, when this kind of hard evidence surfaces, that the world wakes up as to how they are treated. Stephanie Decker, Al Jazeera, Al Bida in the occupied West Bank.
Well, Joseph Kashishian is a professor of US Middle East Relations at Pepperdine University in Malibu, and he joins me now from Los Angeles. Joseph, a very warm welcome to the programme. Thank you for being with us. We heard John Kerry a little bit earlier describing this move to have 24-hour surveillance as a game changer, I think he called it. Do you think that's right?
I'm afraid it is not. It is more of a political discussion that is going on right now to try to change the subject as much as possible. A game changer would include something a lot more substantial. It would have to focus on actually addressing some of the core issues that the Arab-Israeli conflict have been dragging on for many, many, many decades. And this is just placating to a particular audience. It is not a game changer at all, and unfortunately it will not make a dent.
And Joseph, who can influence either side now? Does the US still have that privilege, if you like, of being able to influence Israel? And who can influence the Palestinians? I mean, it would seem right now we're in that kind of dire situation where there's little that can be done to influence either side to make progress.
Well, influence is a very fluid term. If the Israelis want to be influenced by the United States, then I'm sure Washington would cater to that. And if the Palestinians want to be influenced by one party or another, I'm sure that the Palestinians would also cater to that. I think at this point, the dilemma is really, the ball is in the Israeli court. The Israelis have got to come to terms with a reality on the ground. After 6 or 7 decades of occupation, they still have not been able to come to terms with a mass of population that is rejecting this occupation. And there is a reluctance to accept the reality on the ground. As long as this reluctance continues, we're not going to see any changes. On the other hand, I think that these acts of violence, called intifada or uprising once in a while, indicate to you how volatile the situation is, and that any kind of spark could in fact generate into fundamental confrontations between the two sides. And the wiser politicians on both sides of the aisle, Israelis and Palestinians, will have to understand that talking about peace is not going to get them to real peace. In fact, what is required is compromise on the ground. There is no alternative to the two-state solution, even though nobody wants to acknowledge that.
And Joseph, we also have the added problem, don't we, that a lot of the Palestinian youth that's incredibly disgruntled and fed up with this lack of progress, they're not looking to the Palestinian politicians to, decide what their future looks like. And it seems to me that they're deciding that this is the only way to be heard. So when do you think those politicians are going to get together and decide that progress, talking, diplomacy is the right way forward?
Well, there is no alternative to diplomacy. On the other hand, Palestinian negotiators have their hands really tied simply because what is required to change the mentalities on the ground and to give diplomacy an opportunity is to have fundamental economic changes. But how can that occur when the Israelis are preventing the economic development of the West Bank and all the other occupied territories? Remember that unemployment among Palestinians is almost 40% for males and nearly 80% for females. And as long as you have this tremendous frustration, economic frustration, diplomacy cannot, by any measure, by any standard, gain the upper hand. Violence will predominate. If, in fact, the Israelis are serious in terms of reaching negotiations, what they will simply do is cooperate with their Palestinian counterparts to encourage development, to encourage economic development that would presumably lead to diplomatic solution.
Joseph Kashishian there, Professor of US Middle East Relations at Pepperdine University in Malibu. Joseph, thank you very much for joining me with your thoughts. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.